I started this podcast because I wanted to do a podcast because I love podcasts. And I thought it'd be a great way to speak to our audience as a company once every week. And it's been an amazing journey.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast brought to you by Indepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to Creative Juice. I'm your host, Circa, and my co-host, Corinne, is not with me today because it's a bit of a special episode on Creative Juice. Basically, this is the month of March is when this episode will come out, and the month of March for us at Indepreneur represents our anniversary. So we started back in March of 2017. I believe this podcast started around the same time. So it's pretty much the fourth year beginning for Creative Juice and for Indepreneur as a company. For those of you guys who don't know, I started Indepreneur in my moonlight hours when I was a marketer for an app development company. So they would have clients developing mobile apps. I would help those clients market those mobile apps. And I was moonlighting, working with Nino Bless and a couple other musicians to market their music. And I was getting requests from all these musicians who I knew at the recording studio that I used to manage to help them market their music. And I figured, why not just teach it so that they can have some self-efficacy, so that they don't have to rely on my limited time in order to get this done for their career. And everything kind of took off from there. So after 3 years, I had the crappiest home office you could possibly imagine. I had this crappy old Lenovo ThinkPad. I think it was 5 years old. And it was a humble beginning for me. And it's crazy what can happen in 3 years. I think we really hit a vein, a pocket of sort of the independent music space and even major label music space that was much needed. And, the response has been overwhelming. So, I promised myself I wouldn't cry. So I just wanted to thank all of you guys for making this truly special, for coming back to this podcast week to week, from our longtime listeners to those of you who just joined us. Thank you so much. It is absolutely incredible to have the experience that I've had over these last 3 years. And I'm not going anywhere. I can't wait for another 3 years of growth with this company. I can't wait for, all the chances that we have to introduce other brilliant minds in the same vein that we work in, and to kind of just expand this out and really, make sure that all musicians have a place where they can come to learn no bullshit, actionable stuff, and learn a skill set that can serve them for their whole career. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce kind of the theme of this episode. We're going to go back through the top 7 episodes over the last 3 years. And we're going to play some snippets from those episodes that might be interesting to you guys. So even if you're a longtime listener, some of my favorite podcasts, I Love Marketing, Perpetual Traffic by Digital Marketer. I've gone back and I've listened to those episodes over and over and over again, because you listen to one and maybe it's, helping you for a few weeks, it's fresh in your mind, and then it kind of fades away and, shiny object syndrome takes over. So to have these snippets of our most valuable episodes to kind of focus on and remind yourself of what you already know is a great opportunity. And for our new listeners, for those who haven't been with us for so long, this is a great opportunity to see old episodes that you might not have heard. So I'm going to be walking you through these episodes. I'm not just going to leave you off for a long trail of snippets, but I'd like to kind of cue them up for you and give you some context for them. So the most popular episode that we've had to date, no surprise, is how the Spotify algorithm actually works, which is episode 103. I believe this episode came out back in October 1st, 2019. So this episode is about a half a year old now. It's crazy how time passes. But this segment that I've chosen for you just is me explaining how the Discover Weekly machine learning model works, how Discover Weekly is generated, and furthermore, how the larger recommendation engine works. So this will give you kind of the meat, the kind of aha moments that were in this episode, but there's just so many that, if you want to go back and take a listen, you can always go to indepreneur.io/episode 103 to listen to the whole thing. And if you want a deep dive into Spotify and just all the things that we would recommend in regards to Spotify, you can take our Spotify field guide training, which is available on our website. If you go to indepreneur.io/products, you can check out that training. It's not very expensive. It's $65. And it's just like a no bullshit walkthrough of everything that we can know about Spotify and some things that we intuit, that we assume, and we kind of make clear the difference between the two, which is, I can't say for so many other trainings. So, there are great trainings out there about Spotify, but, ours is more about like, what's true? What can we say that is true? And what can we assume based on what we know? So check that out. And here is our snippet from episode 103, how the Spotify algorithm actually works. The way that they train the Discover Weekly recommendation engine, the model they use to populate your Discover Weekly, I'm not 100% sure that this is the only model they use, but what's one of them, is they will take a random sampling of playlists on Spotify, and they will, like, actual playlists, like user-generated popular playlists, and they will, let's say it's 30 tracks in length. They'll take out one track, and then they'll train the machine learning algorithm where the only positive feedback is if it guesses the exact track that they removed. So they say, okay, try a million different things. Try to get the right track. And it can go through literally millions of guesses in a very short time frame because it's a computer.
Right.
And only once it starts guessing let's say you train on one playlist until it guesses that track. And then take the settings that you use to derive that answer. Let's go to another playlist. Can you find the missing track in this one?
Wow.
And once they train this algo, to a point where it can just reliably guess the missing track in any playlist, then they take your user history and they tell it to guess the missing track.
That's insane though. My understanding of this algorithm, like, I understand algorithms, right? And I nerd out on some, machine learning stuff, but I've never done it, right? Like, I'm not a developer. So, I'm always impressed with this stuff because, it's, the things that we go to college for, right? Like, we have people who go and get their PhD in psychology, and they're like evaluating behavior, right? And evaluating things and, trying to identify like what caused such problem, right? So they're almost solving like social equations, and like you have to go to college for like years and years and years and years, and study tons of different people before you have kind of like an instinct or even the logic to figure this stuff out. And so
it's nuts.
Yeah, it's crazy that it's such a cool world we live in, which is why, like, when Circa says that soon creativity will be one of the only things automated, like, this is the only thing that isn't automatable, right? Like, this is one of those things that really illustrates exactly what that is.
Yeah, and to a degree, like, the Spotify recommendation engine is making decisions that we would typically foist onto the realm of creativity, quote unquote.
Right.
Like, putting together a playlist that people are going to enjoy that follows a narrative in terms of energy is something that we would consider a creative task, like a DJ does it.
True. Well, that's crazy that the machine's probably doing it better than a curator. You know what I mean?
That's so crazy.
Yeah. So wait, I have a question. Does the algorithm do this based solely on user activity across its, hundreds of thousands or millions of users, however it is? Or does it like analyze beats, or like what all is up in this?
So perfect question to get into it. So when you go and visit Spotify, let's say on a desktop or mobile, you go to visit Spotify and your homepage populates. Now, your homepage has its own recommendation engine behind it, which is based off of a lot of the math we're going to go into in a second. But let's say that you go to like an algorithmic playlist or just your homepage, like anywhere where the algorithm is invoked. And it's really a recommendation engine. I've been trying to train myself off of calling it an algorithm because it's actually like many, many algorithms.
Right.
But yeah, it's a recommendation engine. So let's say you visit your Discover Weekly, for instance. Your Discover Weekly is fed by what is called the recommendations pipeline. which is like a storage house for the mathematical calculations of the recommendation models. So recommendation models discover for this user ID, based on what we know right now, what are the right songs.
Whoa.
And it feeds those recommendations into a pipeline, which then gets distributed out to you. And most of these things are updated daily. Now, there's 3 recommendation models behind the pipeline. And the primary one is what they end up calling, there's many different ways to describe it, but I like to call it the latent vector space is what they call it. And it seemed like the easiest way to understand it. So, okay, basically every song ID, every user ID, every artist ID exists in a 2 or 3 dimensional, depending on how you calculate it, space, like a physical space. And proximity to each other equals likelihood of similarity. Right. So like if my user ID is close to this song ID in the latent vector space, then it is likely that I'll enjoy the song if I've never heard of it.
Right.
And so the way that they calculate that is they take they use matrix math, which is like really intense math. I can point you to a mini course from Khan Academy that I took to try to just like wrap my head around what was going on.
Oh my gosh.
And it's great. We'll walk you through it pretty well, but you'll definitely go cross-eyed like a few times. But ultimately, like a matrix in mathematics, a matrix is like a set of brackets, and in those brackets is rows and columns of numbers, right? Now, so you might think of it as like a grid of numbers.
Yeah, like the Matrix drop-down screen, right?
Yeah.
Like those are
Exactly,
all numbers
right.
and rows and columns.
So let's say on that screen there was like rows and like there was 5,000 rows and 3,000 columns or whatever, of numbers.
Right.
That would be a gigantic matrix. Now, Spotify's matrix that they start out with is every user ID and every song ID in Spotify, okay, so user IDs are rows, so that's 217 million rows.
Oh my gosh.
And it's estimated somewhere north of 60 million columns, right? Now, so let's say I go to Corinne's user ID in the matrix, and then I go to one of her songs, right? In the columns.
Yeah.
At that intersection of her row and the song's column, there should be some data there to tell me she streamed this song, right?
Okay,
yes,
okay.
that's a positive.
Right.
But what I don't know, but I assume, I don't know this for sure, but I believe that they have a way of saying that you've listened to a song more than once. So it's not just zeros and ones, it's not just binary, but I don't know that for sure because they represent it as binary.
Right.
So, okay. So then they use a process, a calculation called matrix factorization. I have it on the screen right here. So they have different variables here. So it's 1 if a user is streamed to tracked, otherwise it's 0. And then, so they run this big calculation and it basically spits out 2 numbers. One is the vector, the latent factor vector for the user and the latent factor vector for a item, which is a song. Right. Basically meaning it spits out coordinates for where these things should go in latent vector space. It takes all the data about who has streamed all these tracks. What other tracks have those users streamed? And they run this complex matrix factorization to arrive at a set of coordinates for where songs and users should sit in latent vector space. They remake the vector space every day.
Oh my gosh.
And
okay. Wait a second. So
yeah.
I'm like, hold on, because Circa's going to go down the rabbit hole here. So can you talk about this? Like, okay, I'm in a room, right? Like, can you explain this in some way in the common physical world? Like, I know we're taking something that's kind of like if anyone's ever used Music Map, right? Like that's the most simplistic version of this that we could be talking
it's
about.
Sort of like right? it, but not really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, like, can you make this something in the tangible world? Is there a way that you can kind of illustrate? Yeah.
Totally. Let's say that your row in the matrix and my row in the matrix are almost identical.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Except for one song that I've streamed and you haven't.
Okay.
That means that like the one song that I streamed and you haven't is so close to you in the latent vector space
Mm-hmm.
that it is like the primary candidate to get recommended to you in some way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So depending on how similar users look in the tracks that they're listening to and what the algorithm has said that these various users have listened to, they're almost like grouping people together, like by the things that they've liked and comparing the rows of or the columns of the things that they've listened to and figuring out like, okay, where's the whole, like they have all these ones that match and here's the ones that only this person has listened to and here's the one only this person has listened to. So now I'm going to basically like switch them over kind of, so that I'm suggesting these other songs.
Right.
Yeah, I got it.
If it were monofactorial, like if it was just like, okay, find me all the users who are almost identical, but except for one song.
Right.
And then let's recommend those songs to people. Like that might be a very simplified version of what the recommendation engine would do.
Very
but then you
simplified,
add in, right. Then you add in, find me all the songs that have been streamed by almost the exact same users except for one.
Mm-hmm.
And then recommend it down the chain. Okay, now you're adding in another factor. So the matrix factorization allows you to deal with like 3 or 4 different factors and arrive at an actual physical like space,
right?
Basically. And it's not, so like when because they do in these developer conferences, they will pull up a graphic like version of the latent vector space, but they're doing it so you can understand better because that's not where they operate, right? Like they're not like flying through the latent vector space, sniping out, nearby neighbors to your user ID.
Yeah,
like
Star
that's not
Trek
how it works.
Galaxy
it's not
stuff.
like a video game.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Like this is just a visualization,
right?
But it's a great way to understand what's going on. They show you different renderings of the vector space. So I show you some renderings where like color represents genre groupings. So as it gets like closer to this hue, you're getting more into like the hip hop, and then the deepness, the actual lightness of the color represents streaming frequency. So you can look at a person's like I can look at your personal vector space and just look at song IDs and artist IDs and where they all fit.
Right.
And look at your streaming data and it can show me depth. So there's like lots of different things that they can do. They can even, there was one developer who was talking about, I can go to once we run this matrix factorization, I can go to it and say Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Yeah.
Plus like a song by Eric Clapton minus Nirvana's unplugged version of Smells Like Teen Spirit. What does that equal? And the algorithm will spit out the unplugged version of the Eric Clapton song.
That's crazy.
No bullshit.
Yeah.
So they can run simple math operations on it. I hope you enjoyed that snippet. Is definitely, it was a blast to learn so much about the Spotify algorithm and the Spotify recommendation engine rather. And I certainly enjoyed recording that episode and that training. So once again, check out the training if you're so inclined, or check out the full episode if you just want to kind of get a deep dive on the recommendation engine. The next most popular episode in our short history is episode 67, which is part of a 4-part episode on the buddy system. For those of you guys who don't know, the buddy system is it's like a model we use here at Indepreneur to diagnose and plan and kind of structure out the marketing for a music career. So it is an 8-step system that's all based on the listener journey. So basically, if someone doesn't know who you are, what are the different steps they have to go through before they're like your biggest raving promoting fan? We break that down into steps that are identifiable, that are targetable, and then we create a system that can move anyone from one of these stages to the next. So it's a big machine that just moves people from one stage to the next. And the first 2 stages are introduction and education. Introduction is defined by people the first time they hear of you, right? So if they've been introduced to you, they've heard your music, they've had a touch point or a point of contact with you, then they are now in the introduction stage. They've completed that action. Education is a little bit more, it's difficult to define because ultimately we know that a lot of people, before they're going to do something like sign up for one-to-one communication with you, give you their phone number, give you their email address, they kind of need to know more about you. It takes more than just one touch, introduction, before people are likely comfortable with subscribing or giving you permission to contact them further. So in between introduction and permission, there is education. And that's the other stage that we talk about in this episode 67. This episode is old. It's back in October of 2018. So actually it's about a year and a half old now. It's actually 1 year almost to the day prior to the Spotify episode, which is pretty interesting. But it is a pretty interesting episode. It's an interesting episode arc. And if you don't understand the buddy system and you've been listening to us for a while, or you're getting into our stuff, it's kind of the first thing that we want you to understand. We have a training on it, which is free with any training that you might get from us. And we frequently give out the training for free just to anybody, because it's that important. It's something that we really want people to know. We don't want to have to charge people for that information. And typically we only charge for information that necessitates a training. Like I can tell you in a podcast episode how the buddy system works. Much more difficult for me to tell you in a podcast episode how to run this specific Facebook ad campaign, because there's a lot of, ins and outs to it. So this is just a 4-part walkthrough of the buddy system for anyone who wants to know, and you should know. And this snippet is about that introduction stage and a little bit about the education stage. If you ever want to listen to the whole episode, you can go to episode 67. So indepreneur.io/episode 67. And if you want to take the full buddy system training, you can just purchase any training from us. Any training of any price, you get the buddy system free with it. And also you can just listen to the whole episode arc if you want to learn more about the buddy system and you don't want to take a training. So all those options are available to you. And here's episode 67. Making content that seems like it's just shared, right? So if you're on a social sharing platform like Facebook, like what kind of content are people sharing? That's what my ad should be like. It should be something that people want to share, and I'm not asking them to do something, and they're not maybe not aware that it's an ad even.
Right.
And so I really harped in on that when we were first starting up. And some of our initial successes with Palmer Reed, with Nino Bless, was all about the Fan Finder ad. And Fan Finder is a method developed out of this awareness of like, we need an indirect introduction. We need to slip in under the radar and make people think it was their idea, that they discovered us. Because when you're showing your music to someone, that's fine, man. Like you might get some great fans, but like the biggest musicians are discovered en masse. How do we create en masse discovery intentionally? And that's out of that, the Fan Finder method was born. It was born out of this psychology we're talking about.
Right. Well, I think too, it's like I listen to so many podcasts. I'm in so many Facebook groups about, promoting music. Right. And I just feel like there's a fundamental brokenness about so much of the advice that I see, or even about just people who are sharing what they're doing, because it's doing the exact opposite. It's not trying to be under the radar. It's not trying to come off as something that's natural, or, that it's being suggested because of previous content that that a user has experienced or interacted with. It's quite the opposite. It's like, go follow us on Spotify, go do this, go do this.
Right.
It's very,
it's like, here's 30 seconds of a video, go here to watch the rest, or go here to listen to it. It's like,
yeah.
It's like, I just met you at the party. I'm not going to your house.
Right, exactly. Hey, man, come out here and take a look at this song. You're like, no, I'm good right where I am. Thank you. Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's funny because we get feedback all the time where people are like, I don't want to be so salesy. And it's like, well, listen, you're not really looking at, the kind of stuff we're encouraging in a way that is full scope, because we're recommending the opposite of salesy when you first meet somebody, when they're first introduced to your music. We're doing less than the industry standard for an introductory video, which is that we're not telling people what to do. We're not putting a CTA button on there. We're not trying to get them to do something. Some people invite, people to like their page after the first video. I don't even do that on the first video. I do that on like the second video or whatever, which is, totally dependent on your budgets and what you're doing. But like for me, I'm like, no, man, just experience it, and if you like it, there are ways I have to follow up with you to ask you for something, or, maybe be a little more salesy. I'm using air quotes if you can't hear it in my voice. That can be more salesy later, because at that point, it's not, they got there by their own volition. They weren't convinced. I didn't take them hostage or kidnap them and order them to do something. Right. At that point. At that point, it's an offer in the most literal sense of the word. You're offering them something. But if you don't do it right from the introduction phase, like your whole system will come off salesy, So that's one way that you kind of counter that salesiness that you're worried about later is by doing the introduction phase right.
Right. Yeah. Like you don't want to be begging for an opportunity. You don't want to be begging for friends. Right. And like, that's what I love about like the Facebook platform is that like it's so subtle. Not only can your advertising be native so that it doesn't even seem like an ad, but it's sort of voyeuristic. Like, so for those of you guys who don't know, like the fan finder method is to take a video that much more closely mirrors the type of content that your audience is already sharing, like viral content. So cell phone recorded videos, looping videos, one-shot videos, things that aren't intimidating with high production value. Put it in front of them without a link, without a call to action button, and just a headline. And it's already got tons of comments on it, engagement, likes. So when they see it, it's almost voyeuristic. Like they're peering into a world that's not theirs. They're discovering something because it's not for them. It's not asking them to do anything. And that's kind of how we know that it's like targeted at us when it's asking us to go here and sign up or whatever. That's when it really sets off the alarm of like, oh, they're trying to catch me, right? But when you see an ad that doesn't have a CTA, doesn't have a link, and it's just a bunch of people enjoying a piece of content, you're like peering into a world that you know nothing about. You're discovering it.
Yeah, there's no ransom on it at that point. There's no ransom on taking an action.
And that's like, there's like, if you guys don't know the analogies or the equivalents of that in human relationships, like you haven't lived long enough. We all know about like people who need this interaction to go right. And then we know the people who play it cool, and the people who play it cool get way more friends because they don't even like need to get your number. It's like, oh, I'll see you later. I'll see it. We just met. And it's very possible we could never see each other again, but you're not even going to try to get me to do something. You're just going to assume that, hey, I'll catch you later, right? Like that's so cool, right? Like I think there's a Dazed and Confused like quote about that, right? Like Matthew McConaughey, like I'll catch you later, I'll see you later, right? I'll see you out there. It's like, well, you might not. Like, wow, it's living dangerously, right? So when you do that in an ad context, right? Like it's that like you're friggin' Steve McQueen, like you have all these people paying attention to your content. You don't need that other person to. You're giving them the option to, which is way cooler. And so, yeah, I think it's the best foot forward. And that's why I love Facebook ads, because it allows you to play it cool, because you can create a custom audience of people who have watched that video to a certain depth and serve them a follow-up message if you want to. So they have no idea why you're playing it so cool. You know the secret is that you save this audience, and you'll always have the opportunity to catch them later. Right. So, but they don't see that. All they see is you just like friggin' Matthew McConaugheying it.
I love that. That's our marker for who's cool.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that snippet. I always enjoy a chance to talk about the buddy system because it's so foundational to success as a business in a music career. And we're not the only people who talk about a multi-step system for generating customers or subscribers or fans. Pretty much, if you go to any business marketing guru or any business marketing company who's going to teach you about marketing, they're going to teach you to break down the journey of your target audience into steps, and then each campaign should address a different step. That's really all the buddy system is. And so I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you go on to learn a lot about the buddy system. The next most popular was episode 42, which is it's the oldest episode on this list, and it is an episode in which we interviewed a case study of ours, Caracal. Caracal is an indie musician from Quebec, Canada. She's had a music career. She's been in the game for a little while, and she's been a part of successful bands and stuff in Canada. And she was coming back around to a solo career, having a little bit of trouble with her label, a little bit of trouble with her management, not really getting anywhere, and was looking for a way to sort of take her success into her own hands when she stumbled across our ads. And sure enough, she went through the trainings. She started implementing them. She became a founder so that we could help her with her album launch. So she joined our coaching program, Indie Founder, and she was one of our first founders. And it was awesome because we got to take her all the way through the album launch process, and she had a successful launch. And it was awesome to watch. Like, it totally gave her all this, it reinvigorated her, expectations for her music career and what she could do with it. It also showed her how, marketing is a creative thing. It's like a creative extension. People who are really good at marketing can use it to extend the creativity they're trying to, elicit with their music or with their art. So if you master marketing to a certain degree, you can now begin to use it as an art form. And that's certainly what she learned. Now this comes to us from March 6th of 2018. So it's an old episode. And I'm super excited for you guys to listen to it because a lot of you who are listening to this might not have heard it before. So please enjoy this snippet. This is Caracal explaining her album launch, her process of going from like never having heard of us to launching an album with us and what that was like. So I hope you enjoy it.
So then I launched my solo career. I was signed to a small indie label here in Montreal, and we released 2 albums together. And then I stopped for a while because I had a baby and I was on tour and I was doing different projects in songwriting and doing other stuff. And so the last time were 5 years ago. And then, we decided to go into this new album process with my label about 2 years ago. And everything was, seemingly going well. I went to Los Angeles to work and record. And I was really happy about the music. Then this thing happened. My label, got rough financial phase with their business because obviously, the business model of labels, as we knew it before, like it crashed, right? We all know that. Right. So I was I was a victim of that in the middle of my album process. And it was really stressful because I had this music, but label was going to be able to put it out. And for a couple months, I'm like, okay, I think I might have to do this on my own. And I really had no clue because, as I said, I come from the world of before. So I didn't know anything about how to promote my music, how to work online. I had never done any of that before. Wow. And out of desperation, really, I'm like, okay, nobody is taking away my career. Like, it's not, people did not adapt. My career is going to be over. So figure this out. Really my interest in online marketing. And so I started studying and researching, and I did a bunch of different courses, and I ended up, seeing this ad on Facebook. I guess I was in your targets somehow for the cheat sheet. So I'm like, oh, this looks really cool. And so, I started like looking into that and getting involved in a group. And I'm like, oh my God, this works. This is amazing. And it kind of like gave me a new impulse to, to learn how to do this, myself and take control back. And eventually things got better with my label, and we decided that we're still going to continue working together, but like they don't really work online, and I'm just discovering all the possibilities.
Right. Well, yeah, we'll get to that definitely. That it's so cool to kind of hear the backstory, because I don't think I ever got a full look at where you came from. I didn't know that you had a big band before. I just thought you were a big solo artist. So that's very cool to hear. And then it also tells the story of like knowing kind of the spot you were in when you first started kind of pulling this thread of building your online presence was really interesting to hear about. So when what kind of led to, because I remember that I was very interested in your music early on in the group. Like I loved it. You posted this animated video, and I was very surprised to see that this animated video did well for you at first with FanFinder, because it's not something that we typically see. And I was just like, this music is dope. And I tagged my engineer, my producer in it, because they're big on kind of the same musical style. you know, but I don't really remember how we got to bringing you on the founder team. I just know that I was always interested in working with you. So can you tell us kind of your side of that?
Yeah, well, okay, so I first started FanFinder with that video. It did fairly well, but I was so motivated to figure it out. I was like in Indepreneur group, like on a daily basis, like being such a nerd, like researching all my similar artists like crazy. And also the fact that I'm a bilingual artist makes everything more complicated because I always have to think, okay, I have this Francophone market that likes my French music, but they might also like my English music. And same with, all the English speaking countries, they might like my French stuff, but it's going to be more niche. So I always had like all these different, things going in my mind, like, okay, who's my people? Like, where are they? Is this for French people? Is this for English people? Is this for everyone? How do I figure this out? So I was researching a lot about similar artists. Like, do I use French artists? Do I use English artists? Like, and I had all this system with like, so I could understand myself in my notes. Like, this is like 2 stars means English stuff, and like 1 star is French stuff, and like a mix of both. This is like bilingual stuff. It got super intense. So, anyways, I was really like, I think I was like, every day in the group, like reading what people are doing and just like being in touch with everyone. And then, I would read every single email that you sent, to the normal people who signed up for the FanFinder. And like, I always read like all the way to the bottom, like the 4th PS down at the bottom. And that's when I came across apply for Indie Founder program. And I'm like, just from the little bit of testing that I had done with the FanFinder, this was the most like hopeful thing I had come across in this big really difficult period I was in, like with my label and all the things that didn't work out the way that I wanted. This was like my most hopeful thing. I'm like, I think this, I don't know, I think this, I rely on my intuition a lot in my music, in everything I do. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to apply for this. And I did not know if my label would be okay with that. I was kind of like, bypassing the system a little bit, but I still applied. And then, you kind of selected me for it. I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? How am I going to tell my label that I want to work without my label? But the thing is, like, my label is really, they have a really indie type of mindset. And when I told them about it, they're also looking for solutions, obviously, because their system that they used before is not working anymore. So they were excited for me, and they're like, oh, we've been working together for a long time. We had a rough time, like, try this and let's do this. So they kind of gave me the permission to develop my thing on the side. We did not know, for me, this was like a test drive. I didn't know if it's, I was hoping it was going to help me, but I didn't really know, until you test it. So yeah, that's how it happened. And then I started working with you, and it was such a big help, because
little did you know that language, I think it's so funny that, because I mean, how many weeks were we like, these 2 languages? Because it just gave you like such a crash course, in all of the technologies you might possibly need to use for the, for the first chunk. And I gotta say, I mean, Carol, I've been so impressed because, like, when I think of like an artist, like someone who is like, just in their soul, very artistic and creative, and has very fluid thinking. I've been so impressed with the way that you have navigated having, that kind of that soul and that artistry, but then still like diving into all of this technical stuff. I mean, that to me has been, I know it's not necessarily what you love, but you've just been so open to it and passionate about it. And I think like that's why I was so excited to have you today, because I think there's just so many of us who need to hear that, because we're artists that maybe don't love it, but you just really embraced it and you did so many things. So
well,
anyway,
thanks for noticing, because it was a challenge for me at times. Like, and you have to understand, like, before maybe a year ago, I didn't even know how to boost a post on Facebook. Like, I did not know anything. And, but it's really first out of desperation at first. And then I discovered, like, wow, this is fun because it's creative. It helped me like understand who my music speaks to, like what kind of artist am I, like all this thinking that you don't necessarily do, and so for me that was really important, even to help me figure out like where am I going next, what kind of branding, what kind of how can I extend the artistry of my music to my online, because it has to be fun. Like it's fun to design those pages. It's artistic for me. Like there was a technical challenge at first, which, and I'm sure people listening to this podcast, like there's tons of indies, like completely overwhelmed with like, oh my God, MailChimp and like Zapier and like Facebook. And how do I do this? And, I've been there. I think I did not sleep for like 6 months. I was always like, okay, I need to figure this out. I need to understand. And I'm proud of myself because I kind of feel like now, I'm not as good as you guys, but when you talk about this stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. Like now I know my shit. And people have been calling me, like other musicians in Montreal are like, hey, can we go for coffee? Like, how did you do that? Like I'm happy because it's been noticed. It's been noticed that, I'm doing this myself. And the way that you're doing it yourself is kind of, it's bringing you a lot closer to your listeners. And the more you do it yourself, I think they feel it in the way that your online, your socials, or the way that you express yourself in your socials, like, it's a creative thing. So for me, it's like, okay, I did that in my music. Now I'm in marketing mode. Let's take that creativity and apply it to this new phase of like putting your baby out into the world. And that's like, I don't go halfway. I'm like, I was fully involved in this for like 6 months. It was hard. I was crying on a daily basis. I'm very emotional. You know that by now, but like, I'm like, I was determined. And it worked. So cool.
Once again, thank you, Caracal, for coming on the podcast back then. We got to have her back on because she's done a lot since then. She's about to launch a song with my longtime collaborator and Testing Grounds artist, Dukes. I'm very excited for that. So yeah, she's rad. We'll have to have her back on. The next episode in our lineup is episode 99. What is your merch strategy? Now, Corinne is like our merchandising expert. She knows a lot about Shopify. She knows a lot about third-party logistics and shipping and fulfillment and printing merch and like SKUs and all this. And I'm not good at that stuff, but Corinne's our resident expert for that. So this is a great episode, and it's no wonder why it's in our top 7 in terms of popularity. So this snippet is a little bit about us sort of explaining, the model of having 3 main products when you first start offering products. You only have to focus on 3 SKUs, 3 items, and it's not too much to focus on, and it can help you launch your customer base. And then you can start building products based on what those customers, tell you that they want. You can begin talking to them and surveying them. So I hope you enjoy this snippet from episode 99. What is your merch strategy? At a grassroots level, inventory like 3 products, have inventory of it. And that is for like, it's wrapped around your album cycle typically. And you want to maintain the highest margins possible. And you want to limit options, and you don't need a wide spectrum of things. And you want to do your shipping manually if possible, and just preserve as much revenue because, and I think the reason here is that your cost of customer creation, all the odds are against you at this point. All the odds in the world are against you, and your cost of customer creation is going to be the highest it will ever be before you're making enough money to actually spend a lot of money on creating customers. So you need to kind of get out. You're going from 0 to 1, which is a near impossibility. And so you really need the padding if you get an order, it should pay for many failed orders. That's kind of the psychology there. And so for a period of time, that's where you are and you're staying there. And then once it shifts, what of these principles change? What of that set of things I went over changes at like an affirmation level?
Yeah. Well, at that point you get to like get some higher priced items, right? That's kind of exciting. Some people are also using.
So it's building out the value ladder is like a portion of affirmation. Gotcha.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because that's the point where it's like, all right, you've already, kind of come into this, right? And already made, well, and it's, which stage of affirmation are we talking about, right? Because in theory, like the first sale can kind of count as affirmation, but if there's enough length, right, between orders, if someone's only returning to your store or coming back to you a year later, like affirmation is like, are we still good? And so at that point, like the second order it kind of fits into affirmation, right? But I think that there's a couple of different ways that you can interpret that, but essentially like you want to start building out, basically, and we've talked about this before, but essentially like there should always be one product above where people have purchased, right? Like at least 5 people. And then once those 5 people buy that $45 item, then add another one, right?
Right.
And continue to create more and more custom and beautiful things further up the list. And when you start getting into these things, you also have to, that's when margins really become important. And also customization, which is just your time and labor versus purchasing things outright. That's when things come really, really, really important. Like custom, if you're an artist and you paint, like painting shoes, like for my brand, like Doc Martens would make sense, right? Like if I bought some, standard Doc Martens and then kind of flourished them, or Chucks or something like that, that would be something that would be, that would fit my brand. And so different things like that are, where you start being able to kind of charge more without increasing your cost, because it's customized and personalized, very similar to what we were saying about the order bump of an autograph, right?
Right.
And then, it can go crazy high. And then I think some people are kind of understanding that with their membership sites or with their Patreons, right? Where you've got these tiers that, you basically don't want to have 5 tiers above the highest one someone's actually purchased. Someone might come along and buy that very top membership, but chances are probably not, right? Except like your mom or whatever. Like mom can just send you money. You know what I mean? Like you don't need to do all that for her. So I think that's something that you really should apply to your products as well. Like don't put it on yourself to create all of this huge overhead, right? And this ladder that goes up to the sky. Like all you need is one more rung than where you already are.
Yeah. And so this is really to kind of explain what's happening there. Like if you've gotten past Grassroots, you've done the hard job of building an engine that delivers you customers at break even or profit. Now, instead of trying to lower the cost of creating those customers, which at this point is nigh impossible, if you've done it right, you've gotten it down to as low as it can be. You now have to extend the value that each customer represents, which means existing customers have to make second purchases. And now that they've already had a great purchasing experience with you in your store, they're ready for maybe a higher tier of purchase. When we say value ladder, we mean, okay, first step on the ladder or the first rung is the entry level product, typically what we call a tripwire, something below $20 or $10, just to get them, people have a lot of apprehension when you're building up to this point where they make a purchasing decision. And the higher the cost, the higher the wall between you convincing them and them actually purchasing is. So you want to lower that wall down until it's a very insignificant purchase. And that gets them through the door. If you deliver a dream come true experience with your fulfillment and with the product that they get, now all that apprehension is gone. And when you next offer them a product, you're not selling. You're just saying, hey, this is available. So it's better if you get them there with something that's like a little less intimidating. So Coming in at number 5 for our top 7 podcast episodes, we have episode 84, which is with one of our IndieX clients. IndieX is our agency, and we work with independent and major musicians in our agency to help them develop kind of their independent revenue stream. So some of our clients, we're trying to build up their fan base. That's kind of an edge case. We don't do that so much in IndieX. IndieX is more about helping those who have done that work and them bringing on a marketing agency to help them monetize. Because a lot of times it's not worth it to have an agency help you build. It's more worth it to have them help you monetize because it's a higher price point in terms of like help. So he's one of our clients who's kind of doing both. He's building up his fan base even more, but he's also monetizing really, really well. And he's doing it through community building exercises. So I hope you guys enjoy this. I was not in this episode. This is actually with Jack and Corinne interviewing Dave, but I hope you guys enjoy Dave's snippet where he talks about some of his higher tier products and how that's going.
Whether you're using like the buddy system as like a how-to manual printed out on your desk or not, all of the things that you're doing are really just tying into that whole psychological growth, And so you guys, Jack, you're still running things to brand new people as well, right? Like this isn't just for people who have already somehow managed to enter Dave's world. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. We've got a number of, fan finder-esque video views campaigns running. We actually even have a Monday Night Worship video ad similar to the one that Dave was talking about with him and his bird in it. We actually have a cold traffic audience that we're running that to as well. People that, we identified through some audience research as people who would be interested in joining in on an online worship type community. That's something really cool that I think makes what Dave is doing really special. Is that it's beyond just the interest of music. It's going really deep into what his core audience is into. It's beyond just the music. It's something else. It's about an experience. And because we can dive into that on Facebook in Audience Insights and do research on that, we can run ads specifically about that, which is really, really cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, it just seems like every time Jack updates me, and for you Creative Juice listeners, Jack came on with us last year. And so I was working primarily with Dave in the first part of his account, and then Jack kind of took over. And so I get updates from Jack here and there. And every time Jack gives me an update about Dave's account, I'm just so excited about just what you're doing and the very clear ascension through all of these phases that are happening. And so, Dave, this is all now culminated. You're actually, you've developed an event, right? Where people are going to buy tickets and go out of town and come see you. Is that something that's in the works now?
Yeah. So we're, I don't know, once again, it's crazy that we're doing this, but we've got a retreat. We've got a retreat happening in October, and it's, I've got a limited number of spaces, but we're going to try and get the people from the Monday Night Worship community that meet with us on Facebook to actually meet in person at an event in New Jersey. And it's, we've sold, I don't know, we're coming up on 20 tickets now. I mean, they're not cheap tickets. It's $400 for the weekend. So, we're just trying to build something. And then what I want to do is we'll do it in New Jersey. Great. But then we've got bots running to see where people want to have us come and play. And what we'll do is take this up to Albany, New York, and we'll take it to New England, and we'll take it to Pennsylvania and all that kind of stuff. And it may change. Jack and I were talking about it, like it may change the way that I tour as we roll into 2020, because all of a sudden, if we can get, 50 or 60 people in a room that are all part of that community, in October, then we can do that 3 or 4 times next year. Like that could just change everything. And we could roll house concerts out around that. I don't know what's going to happen, but we'll see where it goes. But, it is, it's a daunting task to put together a weekend retreat, but we're doing it, and we're just flying by the seat of our pants, and hopefully it's going to work.
Yeah, well, that's Cirque style. So he would definitely approve. He loves let's just put an idea out in the ether, and we're not quite sure how we're going to do it quite yet, but if we don't just start doing it, we'll never learn. So I think that's great.
What an incredible guy Dave is. It's so awesome working with him at the agency level, just because he has so many amazing ideas. He actually really, really cares about his fan base and engaging with them. and he's a hard worker, and he doesn't complain. He doesn't get tired. He doesn't, I'm sure he gets tired, but he doesn't complain about it. He's always just like looking for the next step, looking how he can advance and do more and be more. And that's awesome. He's just an inspiration. So I hope you guys enjoyed that snippet. Number 6 in our countdown is actually a very recent episode. I almost was going to not include it because like a lot of you probably heard it, but maybe it'd be good to get a refresher. And for those of you who haven't heard it, I think, it's popular for a reason. So, this number 6 slot is owed to episode 115, very recent episode, one of our more popular episodes called Artist Marketing in 2020. So it's basically a prediction for what the 2020s will bring in terms of artist marketing and just the world of music marketing. And it's got this snippet. I've got a snippet from my predictions and then a snippet from Corinne's predictions. This also covers a little bit of what Indepreneur is going to be doing this episode. So if you want to check out the full episode, it's indepreneur.io/episode 115. But here's a snippet from myself and Corinne from that episode. I hope you guys enjoy it. So, greater demonetization of music. I think as little as music, costs to listen to right now, it's going to cost even less. Messaging and chat will explode even more. Like, this is just the bubbling up period, but we're getting to the point where, especially when iMessage comes on, and especially when WhatsApp and Instagram become part of Facebook Messenger, we're going to see messaging marketing explode. It's going to be the new email, but different, and like a lot of people think it already is that, but it's not at all. Email is still definitely king. But if people prefer messaging, people start checking their inbox less because they can rely on, communication with businesses from chat instead. That changes things a lot. Greater digital marketing potential overall, more tech means more marketing opportunities, period. Major label model needs to change, but it doesn't mean that major labels are going to die out or even that they should. It's just that they need to change how they're doing things. And I think what I've learned as a business owner, not that I'm like anyone for, a major record label exec to take advice from, I guess. Like, they don't have to take advice from me. They have their whole career and world of experience to rely on. But like, if I were to give a word of advice as a fellow business owner, focus on the customer and the vendor and make them happy. And everything else will fold in around that. Like, there's so many opportunities. If they were treating artists right, they'd have greater access to artist revenue streams. If less artists were pissed about major record labels and the deals they get, they'd be more willing to share in merchandise, which would incentivize the labels to dig heavy into merchandise and digital products and grow both the revenue of the artist and the major label. And that really has to happen in the 2020s. Otherwise, we're going to see it slip away from them in the way that it did Napster, with greater democratization and demonetization and greater fragmentation. A greater convergence of all entertainment mediums, comedy, video, music, acting, artwork, graphic design, all this is going to become more accessible to the average person. There's going to be more audience members demanding more layers of creativity from artists and entertainers. It won't be good enough that you just have a song. What's the visual like? That trend is only going to get deeper because it's going to become easier for the average person to create those kinds of assets. We're going to see a massive increase in independently monetized creatives and entertainers. We're going to see a massive increase in micro influencers. It is now a thing to have an audience of 250,000. You don't need 200 million. You don't need 20 million. 250,000 is enough to both pay the bills, live comfortably, and just create all day, every day. And we're going to see that increase. Now, there's been a whole world of people over the last 10, 20 years telling you to like be an artist on the internet and sell your music online and all this shit and become a, 6-figure independent musician or whatever the hell. But that's real. It's just not happening with the types of people who were talking about it, right? It's happening with like these kids on Instagram, these kids on TikTok. They're proving that model. So I think that it's happening in a place no one expected it to happen, and it's going to continue to happen.
So I know Zerk touched on Messenger a lot. And I think that it's really interesting how the perspective has really shifted on Facebook, because people are like, oh man, now I got to pay, or I can't broadcast the same way, or I can't do sequences the same way. And I know that that's frustrating, because it was basically like being able to text everybody, but in Facebook Messenger, and it was really cool. And as always, people abused that process, and therefore Facebook had to change its policies. It also had to change its policies because of dumb politics. Like, let's all admit it. Like, we know that all of this stuff happening in Congress and people's paranoia about privacy has caused an overcorrection from a lot of these different providers. So, and maybe you highly value your privacy and you think they're right on point. If so, then party for you. But it makes it really hard to market, or at least harder to market. So, but that said, I think that I've basically been spending the last few weeks, and I'm going to spend the next few weeks still updating IndieBot. Cirque built IndieBot in a flurry of learning about messenger marketing. Early days of messenger marketing, early days of ManyChat. Basically, as soon as Digital Marketer was talking about Messenger and ManyChat, we were like, we gonna do it. And so Cirque built out all kinds of stuff into IndieBot. And now it all needs to be updated, because this is a very different company with very different, with a lot of different information, right? And very different needs from our customers. And we've been able to build just a huge index of frequently asked questions when people are going through training. And, our email support team is not really, they're not experts, right? Like, you're not getting Cirque or me or Jack or Jesse, like people who are running this every day. Ed's not checking into support, right? So, our support team isn't really developed to answer these different questions, especially very technical questions, right? And if you're Indie Pro, then you can go in the group and you can chat with other Pro members, and you have access to weekly live Q&As where you can get a ton of answers there. But if you want an answer right now, and it's something that is probably a super simple answer, like, come on, somebody could just give me this answer real quick, and I'm not a Pro member, so how do I get an answer? IndieBot is now going to have just a dictionary of different things that are the questions that we've had for the last 2.5 years, even almost 3 years, of people saying like, yo, this is my question. And it's been repeated over and over and over and over and over. So now IndieBot's going to be able to take care of you. IndieBot for us is also going to be helping manage support, right? Commonly asked questions, questions about billing, just to make things more and more efficient. When the new website launches next year, which I'm sure Cirque covered in his section, but we shall see. When the new site launches next year, Messenger is going to be integrated into tons of our website. So, I'm really excited to see what the new channels of Messenger are. We've even set up an SMS flow for people who want to get a text whenever we upload a new video to Full Stack Creative, or to get text updates from other different events on their account, things like that. So there's a lot of new ways that we can use Messenger. I know that some of that is not totally relevant, or you might think that that's not relevant to you as a musician, but I'm telling you it's not true. We're going to be coming up with more and more ways. And if you haven't checked out the new updated Messenger marketing training, you'll see that there's a ton of stuff in there, and we're going to be innovating as quickly as we can to continue to develop that stuff. So there's a lot of things to still test out, but IndieBot is going to be a badass. So I'm super excited to share that with you guys once that launches. If you go and message our page right now, you'll see there's some stuff in there. A lot of it is still behind a construction panel. More and more of that will be launching and rolling out over the next couple of weeks. So I guess you're just going to have to keep messaging the bot. But there you go. So Messenger is still quite the viable product in 2020.
All right, we are at the end of our countdown, and I was very surprised and delighted to find out that this entry made it into the top 7 because, I like to bring on, friends and collaborators and people I work with personally, people like Casey Schumacher, who is also one of the most popular episodes, and some of my testing grounds artists, people that I market for, just testing out some of my ideas or because we have a long time connection. And And one of those is Dukes. Dukes is my longtime collaborator, longtime friend. I've been trying to market for this gentleman for a long time. I've tried out every strategy with him, some very successful, some very unsuccessful. So we've had a long history together. We've also made a lot of music together, and a lot of my upcoming songs for this year are with Dukes. So he's a great friend, and I'm very excited that he made it into the top 7. So this episode is about Dukes' experience launching his LP or EP, Sarita, and it's a great album. And we did a traditional album launch, a la Ultimate Album Launch style, which is one of our, sort of like more packaged strategies. And he generated 1.2 million views with his leading fan finder campaign for this album launch campaign. And he was able to make all of his marketing budget back and then some, which is great. It's great to hear. So he basically created this huge retargeting audience, really skyrocketed his Spotify, and made all of his money back plus profit. What more could you ask from a campaign? And it was so great that I went through it with my friends. So I actually had him live in the office for this episode. So we're going to play you a snippet from that interview where he's talking about kind of the success of that initial fan finder. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. We took all of the videos and we ran them all against each other with tons of different copy variations for like the headline of the video as ads. And Lady of the Night was a pretty clear winner.
Yeah, far and away.
Yeah. And so this full song wasn't even fully mastered yet. It wasn't ready.
There wasn't, at that time, there wasn't really like a studio version of the song complete. There was the version that we had done that we literally recorded in the car.
Yeah, which sounded
good. Sounded really good. Yeah. It came out really, really great.
Yeah. And like I even listen to that sometimes and put it in my videos, that one track.
I've heard it in there.
Yeah.
Just tune in.
Yeah, but so we didn't have music to release when we decided to run this test.
Yeah.
And then it was like, all right, let's shut off the other videos and we use them as a sequence. So like we ran Lady of the Night to a lookalike audience. So like, because you had already gotten a lot of fans with video running.
Yeah.
So we didn't have to use like interest. You didn't have to use other artists. And we ran it. I randomly put in like this LA audience. Like I don't usually do that. Because it's very costly to market to only a single geographic location. But I was like, the video's in LA.
The copy too, I think. Was,
the copy
was cruising
through
LA,
the streets of LA.
Yeah.
So I figured like maybe LA people will dig it. I did like LA like fans of similar music and then like people who own minivans because y'all are in a minivan and maybe if you see like 7 musicians killing it in a minivan, you won't feel so losery about your
driving your minivan.
Yeah. Maybe you feel like a badass. Yeah. And I just threw it all together and ran it as just like a maybe we could get a little bit of coverage in LA. Yeah. Maybe someone important sees it and shares it, you know? But I fully expected that after a day, results would come back, it would be too expensive, and I just shut it off. But it actually, so the video itself performed at like hundredths of a cent.
Yeah.
Normally we see like 0.2 of a cent, 0.3 of a cent. This was like 5/100ths of a cent.
It was wild.
It was bananas.
Yeah.
And then LA specifically was performing at like less than 0.1 of a cent.
Yeah.
And it was just going huge. It was just like, and it was like the first time I was like, we're going to get to 1 million, like pretty easily.
You said that pretty early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then immediately thereafter, everyone who sees that ad begins clamoring for the song, which was not ready yet.
Yeah.
And so we kind of scrambled to be like, how do we capitalize off of this?
Yeah.
Because we didn't expect such like a door rush.
Yeah. And like looking back, hindsight's 20/20, but that if there was a mistake, it was that, right? Because
I don't know. Well, it also allowed us to try out some things.
That's true.
That I wouldn't have otherwise tried out.
We definitely learned a lot from it either way. I think not having the song and people being like, this is great. Where's
the song?
Where can I listen to this anywhere other than Facebook? Because I wasn't on YouTube. It wasn't anywhere. We didn't have anything to really push. But yeah, it killed it.
It killed it.
Sure did.
So what we did was we got the 3 car video audio tracks together. So what I did on the ad end was anyone who watched more than 50% of Lady of the Night, they saw all the other car videos in a sequence.
Right.
So like, for 4 days afterwards, they'd see the you and Whitney Meyer video, and then 4 days after that, I see the other stand video. And
Yep.
there's a sequence of videos, but people were really clamoring for Lady of the Night in the comments of the video. We put out the audio tracks, and then we built a messenger bot so that you could get a bunch of messenger subscribers. We're like, and so, but like,
we got a ton.
Until that point, I had never felt very I had never written such confident text in an ad, but it was like, everyone who saw this wants this audio. So I was just like, hey, saw this video?
Yeah.
Like, hey, you saw this video. Did you want to hear the song from this video and have it?
Yeah.
Well, just click here and you will. Something basic like that.
Yeah.
And it killed it. We were getting messenger subscribers for like 80 cents or 70 cents per. And everyone was like signing up to download that audio. And then when it finally was on Spotify, we did follow-up ads to push to Spotify. And it did pretty well there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, pretty quickly, I think, well, it was cool because we were able to get the track together relatively quickly after we kind of, I think we hit 1 million, and then shortly thereafter, it was like, okay, now the song's, it's out. It's on Spotify. You can get it here. And I think, we got a lot of saves because of it. We got playlisted, couple playlists, so there was definitely still some buzz,
Weekly,
maybe not as much as the initial, wow, here it is. But at that point, there's people looking out for it, either from the messenger bot, which I think we had 1,000 or 1,100 people somewhere around there.
Yeah.
So people were looking out for it, They were excited to get it, in a place where they could actually hear it.
Yeah. And then so throughout that campaign, our average subscriber costs between Messenger and email was less than $1.
Yeah.
Which is nuts.
Yeah.
And so it made it really easy to kind of subsidize it. Although we didn't make tons of money,
No.
You probably you came out maybe 100 or something like that over your budget.
From what we did with the ad spend.
Total, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, maybe a little bit more than that. Couple $100.
Yeah. So but the kind of the main goal of it as a kind of grassroots launch was just to get a huge base around what you were doing.
Yeah.
But it was a nice fringe benefit that the licensing that came off of it was pretty crazy.
Yeah, and it was cool because not even just from that song, through that, I think I got hit up the song that I did with Whitney, Somebody Like You Loves Me, which there was the other car video for that.
Yeah.
Someone had seen that, and then it was for a makeup commercial in Japan.
Yeah.
And all these random cool opportunities that.
Yeah, so you got synced a couple of times just from the attention we were able to generate.
Yeah.
But so we went into I'd say we got about 400 or 500 new subscribers in the door via email, something like that, and then 1,000 or more messenger subscribers, and then we went through the day by day. So what was your communication with people? Kind of tell me about that experience from your end.
I mean, we were doing a lot of it was through Messenger.
And just for anyone who's listening who doesn't know, we ran our album launch strategy, so people were signing up to get your entire album for free through an interactive series of websites.
Yeah. Honestly, it was amazing. It was a ton of interaction from people. Maybe even a little overwhelming at times, just because you're wow, I want to communicate with these people. I don't want to be this artist that's I don't talk to my fans. So yeah, it was great. I remember talking to you when that was happening, and for me as an artist, knowing that what you were doing was great and valuable, but seeing it happen before my eyes and saying wow, I'm really forming great relationships with these people,
right?
Friends, fans, it's somewhere in between both almost, and it's any success I had prior, that wasn't really something that I had experienced, even when Future got 300,000 plays on Spotify.
Yeah,
I didn't talk to any of those people. I wasn't interfacing with them, and they were telling me what the music meant to them. Or
did that happen? People
with the album with Circa? Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah,
it was great.
And that is it for our top 7 countdown. I just want to say, I started this podcast because I wanted to do a podcast because I love podcasts. And I thought it'd be a great way to speak to our audience as a company once every week. And it's been an amazing journey. It's been crazy over the last 3 years. Like when I really just think back to where this started and where it's come, you know, I started recording this thing on a phone with like a little shitty Smart Lav Plus, like $60 like lav. And now we've got cameras and we've got microphones and we've got a big audience and we're always in the top 100 for iTunes. And it's just crazy, you know, that when you start something and you keep doing it and you keep at it, where it can go. And so I hope that inspires anyone who's listening to just like start something today that you can do every week that means something and just keep it going. And there's no telling, you know, where you could end up. You just give it some time. So thank you guys so much for the amazing past 3 years. And I can't wait to spend the next 3 years talking to you guys and developing this community. And I'll see you guys next week on Creative Juice. Peace out. East Coast, West Coast,